My mother, Audrey Redmond, stood on the stage at the Redmond family reunion in Chicago, a disgustingly satisfied smile on her face, and announced to everyone that she was pregnant with my husband's child. What she didn't know, as she patted her stomach like it was a grand prize, was that I had been playing a long, quiet game, and she had just walked straight into the trap I'd set for her. The air in the grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel, usually buzzing with family chatter, went dead silent. My heart, which had been light moments before, now hammered against my ribs. I looked at Tyson, my husband of 7 years, across the room. His face, usually so calm, was a mix of shock and utter confusion, mirroring my own. He looked at me, then at Audrey, then back at me, his eyes wide, pleading for an explanation I couldn't yet give. Audrey, completely unaware of the bomb she'd just dropped on herself, kept talking, her voice sickly sweet. And I just want to thank my beautiful daughter, Keisha, for introducing me to the man I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. She waved a hand at Tyson, like she was showing off a new car, not stealing a life. My throat tightened. The part of me that was still her daughter, the one taught to respect elders, wanted to disappear. But the woman I had become, the one who knew the truth and had planned for this, started to stir. This wasn't just a mistake. This was a cruel, calculated attack. This wasn't mother and daughter anymore. This was woman to woman, and she had no idea who she was up against. She still saw the little girl she'd raised. She didn't know about the security footage from the fertility clinic, the nurses' statements, the doctor's testimonies of her fraud. She didn't know I'd found her emails and Google searches, or that my home cameras had caught her digging through my files, copying my personal details. Memories, sharp and painful, flooded my mind, a wave of past betrayals that finally made sense. I thought back to my high school graduation in Milwaukee. I was 18, valedictorian, full of hope for my scholarship to the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. I scanned the crowd for my mother, only to see her getting up and leaving with my best friend's father, a married man. A cold knot formed in my stomach that day, a hint of the pattern I'd slowly learned to recognize. I'd always watched my mother, Audrey. She raised me alone, with a fierce, if unusual, love. She taught me to work hard and value education. But even as a kid, I noticed how friends and aunts, Auntie Tina, Aunt Nicole, would just vanish from our lives. Yet, my uncles, usually married men, seemed to stick around. I often wondered if my own absent father was one of her victims. Years later in therapy, I'd learned to separate the mother who loved me from the woman who was a predator. That distinction saved my sanity. At UW-Whitewater, I met Tyson. He was everything I wasn't expecting. A charming football star who was also smart, kind, and down to earth. We fell in love, planned our future. I didn't know until graduation that his family had hit it big in the early 2000s second tech boom. He was the heir to a multi-billion-dollar company, and at 23, I was suddenly stepping into a life I hadn't even dreamed of. My mother, Audrey, was thrilled to help me with this new life. It started small. She'd come over once a week with breakfast, then more often, I'd catch her looking at Tyson, a look in her eyes I'd seen before but couldn't quite place. I remembered my wedding day, just before the ceremony, as I was getting ready. I heard my mother on the phone, her voice low. "She's so lucky," she'd whispered. "I'd do anything to catch a man like that." A shiver ran down my spine, but I pushed it away. It was my wedding day. Later, at the reception, during our first dance, my mother actually tried to cut in, just moments after Tyson and I started swaying. It was awkward. Everyone stared. Tyson looked confused, but his Uncle Robert quickly stepped in, smiling, and pulled Audrey away to dance with him. "Come on, Audrey, let an old man have a spin," he'd said, saving the moment. I tried to laugh it off, but the unease lingered. 3 years into our marriage, my mother's health suddenly required full-time care. How could I, her devoted daughter, say no? So, she moved into our huge St. Paul home, doing nothing but demanding everything. Our relationship flipped. I became the provider, the enabler. I started to resent her being there, the way she drained us. But then, I'd remember her sacrifices, how she raised me alone, how she paid for my college. She was a good mother, I'd tell myself. Therapy would later become my lifeline, helping me untangle messy truth of why I allowed her to stay so long. The attempted gaslighting started subtly. Over the 4 years she lived with us, she'd drop hints, casual remarks about Tyson. He's working late again, dear? A man like Tyson, with all that charm, women must throw themselves at him. Or, are you sure he's really just at the gym? Men can be so sneaky, can't they? She tried to plant seeds of doubt, questioning his faithfulness, trying to chip away at our bond. She thought she was putting a strain on our marriage, but it was actually our struggles to get pregnant that were weighing us down. We were starting IVF, a deeply private journey we kept from Audrey. On the day of my embryo transfer, I felt a sudden wave of nausea and passed out. When I woke up, I was in my bed, a cup of tea on the nightstand, Audrey holding my hand. "You passed out, sweetie," she cooed. "Low blood sugar," she revealed. The look in her eyes, the smug smirk that threatened to emerge, sent my blood boiling. But I kept my cool. She needed to think she'd won, that she stopped us from creating a family. Tyson was disappointed, to say the least. He held my hand while I lay in bed. He asked if I called to reschedule. Not wanting to give anything away, I convinced my husband we needed time to process this disappointment. He understood, showing him to be the kind, thoughtful man I fell in love with. He climbed in the bed and held me while I fell asleep. The next day, the invitation from Auntie Roberta for the Redmond family reunion in Chicago arrived. A welcome break, I thought, from the emotional toll of IVF. 3 weeks later, as we packed the car for the drive from St. Paul, when I got into the back seat, a strange feeling came over me. Audrey was already in the front passenger seat next to Tyson, a smug look on her face. It was normal for the elder to sit in front, but the way she leaned into Tyson, almost touching him, made me deeply uncomfortable. I tried to shake off, but I couldn't shake the feeling she was planning something. The reunion rolled on, a blur of laughter and memories. Then, just as the last of the food was cleared, Audrey grabbed the mic. She thanked Auntie Roberta, gushed about family, then looked at me, gesturing for me to join her on stage. I smiled, obliging, still unaware of the cliff I was about to walk over. The moment she announced her pregnancy, my world tilted. My stomach dropped. My brain tried to make sense of her words, the sheer audacity of her lie, the depth of her betrayal. She was thanking me for introducing her to the man she was going to spend the rest of her life with. She was stealing my husband of 7 years, the man who was my rock, the one person I trusted completely. Tyson, his face now a storm cloud of fury, started walking toward the stage. I saw the anger, a raw, protective rage I'd never seen from him before. But then he looked at me, saw something in my eyes, and stopped. My hand went up, a silent signal. I looked at Audrey, my voice surprisingly steady. "Congratulations, Mother. What's the due date?" She rattled off a date I already roughly knew, having calculated the timing. What she didn't know was that 3 weeks before my canceled IVF procedure, I had run back into the house, having forgotten my purse. My bedroom door was open, which was unusual. As I got closer, I heard her voice. She was on the phone, talking quietly to one of her friends from the country club. Our country club. "I'm in love with a married man," she whispered, "and he's in love with me. His wife can't have children, and she's even picked me to be her surrogate, not knowing I'm going to give him the family he deserves." My blood ran cold. Surrogate? Wife can't have children? It sounded impossibly familiar, yet completely twisted. I hadn't discussed surrogacy with my mother, but it wasn't out of the question she'd overheard conversations or seen mail. I knew she was calculating, nosy, but this was a whole new level of evil. The person on the phone must have asked about her lover's job, because Audrey described Tyson's position perfectly, even naming his company. It was then I understood. My mother, Audrey Redmond, intended to steal my IVF embryos, carry my child, and then claim it was Tyson's She would invent a fake affair, drive a wedge between us, and then easily step into the life I had built. All the pieces clicked: the lost aunts, the vanished friends, the parade of married men. She was a woman who targeted other women's husbands, a parasite feeding on other people's lives. The realization hit me hard, but it also hardened my resolve. The naive girl I once was died that day. The ambitious woman, who had fought for everything she had, took over. I knew what I had to do. I had already put my plan into motion after that horrifying phone call. The moment she had drugged me, she had triggered her own downfall. She had used the information she'd stolen from my files, from listening in on my private talks with Tyson. She'd been bold enough to impersonate me, wearing a scarf and sunglasses, convincing the clinic staff she was me. But what she didn't know was that I was already 3 steps ahead of her. With me knocked out and her thinking she was pulling off the perfect crime, she walked straight into my trap. The clinic, none the wiser to my specific plan, completed the procedure with ease, providing her my information, and requesting a follow-up in 2 weeks. After that phone conversation, I began watching my mother closer. Where she went, who she talked to. I had turned the tides on her, so smug, so sure she was untouchable. She made mistakes, like leaving her computer open with Google searches about IVF and surrogacy. I caught her sneaking through the house when no one was home, looking at private papers, unaware of the new security cameras I'd installed. I caught everything: phone conversations, dirty looks she'd give me when she thought I wasn't looking. But the most disturbing was a conversation my mother attempted to have with Tyson. One night, while I was working late, my mother approached him in his home office. He looked up, annoyance on his face from the interruption. She asked him where I was, as if she didn't know. He gave her a half answer about working late and went back to what he was doing. She moved closer, telling him she was worried about me. "Keisha hasn't been herself lately," she said, "and I've seen her sneaking out of the house late at night." He gave her generic answers, clearly just wanting to get back to his work, but she kept going. She commented that I had been speaking to my male coworker a lot in private, suggesting maybe he was going through something. My husband looked up from his paperwork, stared at her, and finally asked what she was implying. My mother, seeing his serious look, backed down. "Oh, nothing," she said. "Just how big my heart is and how I help everyone." She smiled and walked out, telling him she'd let him get back to work, but the disappointment on her face when she reached the hall disturbed me to my core. "Congratulations, Mother," I repeated, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the stunned silence. "But perhaps you should clarify for everyone here whose child you're actually carrying." Audrey's smug smile vanished. Her eyes, which had been bright with triumph, now darted around, filled with fear. "What are you talking about, Keisha?" she stammered, her voice losing its theatrical flair. "I'm talking about the fertility clinic, Mother," I said, stepping closer, my voice growing stronger. "The one where you impersonated me, using information you stole from my private files. The one where you underwent an IVF procedure, attempting to steal my embryos and frame my husband. But you see, Mother, I knew you were capable of such depravity." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Tyson, his initial confusion replaced by a dawning horror and then a fierce protective anger, was now by my side, his hand a solid anchor at my back. "The security footage, Mother, shows you entering the clinic, disguised, pretending to be me," I continued, my voice echoing through the microphone she still clutched. "The nurse's statements confirm your identity fraud. And the doctor's testimony? Well, that's where things get truly interesting. You see, Mother, the clinic used donor eggs and donor sperm for that procedure. Not mine, and certainly not Tyson's. You are pregnant, yes, but you are carrying a child conceived with anonymous donor material, a child that is neither mine nor Tyson's, in your desperate, pathetic attempt to steal my life and my husband." Audrey's face drained of color. The smugness disappeared, replaced by a twisted mask of shock and pure terror. She looked like a cornered animal, trapped and exposed. Her hand flew to her stomach, no longer a gesture of pride, but of dawning horror. You You set me up, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You set yourself up, Mother, I corrected, my voice ringing with a new quiet power. You tried to sabotage my marriage, gaslight me into believing Tyson was having an affair with you, and steal my future. You failed. And now, everyone knows the truth about Audrey Redmond, the woman who preys on others, the woman who would even try to steal her own daughter's life. The silence in the ballroom was deafening, broken only by the quiet sobs of some of our female relatives, trying to process the enormity of the betrayal. Tyson squeezed my hand, his silent support a comfort. This wasn't just about exposing Audrey, it was about reclaiming my story, my peace, my life. Audrey, finally understanding the complete mess she had made for herself, collapsed. The microphone clattered to the floor, her carefully built facade shattering. She was no longer the charming manipulator, the sneaky schemer. She was just a woman, exposed and broken, her grand plan having blown up in her face. The family reunion ended quickly. Whispers followed Audrey as she was led away, a pariah in the very family she had tried to exploit. Tyson and I left, hand in hand, the future uncertain, but undeniably clearer. The road ahead would be long. The trauma of Audrey's betrayal ran deep, a wound that therapy had only just begun to heal. But now, with the truth out, the real healing could start. I had learned to separate the loving mother from the manipulative woman, but today, I had finally cut ties with the woman who tried to destroy me. And in that, I found a freedom more profound than any wealth or status could provide. Who knows whose baby she's carrying? But it certainly wasn't Tyson's. And it certainly wasn't mine.